We're actually fostering here the dialogue between Canada and Germany on energy topics. We started many years ago doing that, and we're very pleased to continue this tradition today. I would also like to shortly introduce the Canadian-German Chamber of Industry and Commerce to you. Next slide, please. We are part of a network of German chambers, which is located all over the world. We are a bilateral organization supported by the German government that fosters the economic relations between our two countries. And we have been doing this for 50 years, since 1968. And for many years now, part of our team has focused on energy topics. Both Canada and Germany are aiming to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions within the next years and decades. And this involves a lot of processes and technologies in the building sector as well as in other sectors. So we are very excited to learn more about the current market developments in the building sector, and our conference will hopefully give us a deeper insight into that. So before we start, please let me also thank our German partners who support the conference. It is the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, and RENAC, the Renewables Academy AG, our project partner in Germany. And our Canadian partner for the conference is the Vancouver Economic Commission. I would really like to thank the German and Canadian organizations and companies who are joining us today as speakers and who will give deeper insights into the topic. And I would also like to thank all my colleagues who have organized the day with me. Before we start, I would like to shortly talk about our agenda and the housekeeping rules for today. So the agenda, as you can see, we are starting with welcome remarks. We will see a presentation on the Energy Solutions Initiative from Germany and two keynotes, one on the German energy efficiency sector in buildings and one on the Canadian energy efficiency sector in buildings. Also, later we will hear presentations from the German companies. We will have a short coffee and networking break. And then we will also move into more presentations from the German side. Finally, we will have a networking reception and where you can meet the speakers and discuss current topics. Just a short note to the housekeeping rules. So this webinar will be recorded. It will be made available later to you via our thank you mailing. And during our presentations, we will be in the presentation mode that you can see now. And everybody will be muted by default to avoid background noises. Because of the transmission speed, there might be a little delay sometimes until the speaker's microphone and camera are on when switching the next slide. So speakers, be aware of that. And please, everyone in the audience, please use the chat function on the right-hand side for any comments on the presentations. Please also use the Q&A section. And during the break, we will leave the presentation mode and go back to the networking mode that you've just seen with the tables. So please feel free to network with our speakers and audience. And if you have any questions, please come and find me in the networking mode or just write me a message in the chat. I would now like to welcome Peter Sun, who's analyst for economic transformations in green buildings at the Vancouver Economic Commission. He has a background in real estate, business strategy, architecture, and construction. And Peter joined the Vancouver Economic Commission to support the green economy, decarbonization, and resilience work in Vancouver's built environment. He currently works with public and private sector stakeholders on implementing actions identified from the Green Buildings Technology Attraction Strategy. And the results will continue to support the electrification and decarbonization efforts in Vancouver and British Columbia. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you for that, Nadine. Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Peter Sun. I'm the Green Buildings lead here on the decarbonization team at the Vancouver Economic Commission, or VEC. Before we begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that both the VEC and I are located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I presume that many of you are calling in today from either across the country or possibly across the world. I'd like to invite everyone to also take a moment to recognize the land and the people that you coexist with and reflect on the impact that the built environment has on the land. With that in mind, I'd like to encourage further thoughts and consideration when we approach our work of placemaking in the built environment and meaningful reconciliation with the people of the land. As a City of Vancouver agency, our purpose here at the Commission is to support the building of a prosperous, inclusive, low-carbon, and resilient economy for all in Vancouver. We focus on issue-based economic development and transformation, with key focus areas in decarbonization, circular economy, innovation and commercialization, investment attraction and capital, sustainable workforce development, and lastly, indigenous economy prosperity. Since the conception of 1996, our approach to economic development has helped hundreds of businesses grow and expand, informed significant city policies, and supported high impact investments in our cities. Buildings are the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Metro Vancouver, emitting over 4 million tons per year, which is roughly 25% of the region's total annual emissions. And in denser areas like the boundaries of Vancouver proper, building emissions can reach close to 50%. And a recent study done by the Pembina Institute reports that 70% of Canada's buildings today will still be in use by 2050. And I'm sure that everyone here can agree that the built environment has and will continue to have a significant impact on our climate. But of course, that doesn't stop there. Buildings are where we spend approximately 90% of our time. A healthy economy and society relies on efficient, healthy, affordable spaces where we live, play, and work. The air we breathe in buildings has also a considerable impact on the productivity of workers. Cleaner, greener, more efficient buildings can have a positive economic impact on businesses when designed with health in mind. And widely regarded as the global center of excellence in green buildings, Vancouver's green building design and construction is the second largest sector under the local green building umbrella, driven by progressive local policies and international demand for expertise. In Vancouver, progressive programs and policies such as the Zero Emissions Buildings Plan for new construction and the upcoming large building emission standards for existing building set the requirement for local construction and retrofit activities. But often, we see companies and entrepreneurs exceeding local and provincial green building standards by incorporating global green building standards such as LEED and WELL. Similar to many parts of the world, we are seeing growing trends and opportunities in five areas. One, decarbonizing our mechanical system and improving the building energy efficiency. Two, enhancing on-site resilience with renewable energy generation and storage. Three, increasing the circularity and enhancing the full life cycle value to reduce carbon impact. Four, optimizing building performance with visualization to reduce resource use and increase tenant comfort. And five, lastly, increasing the productivity through offsite manufacturing and modular industrialized construction processes. The VC continues to support, aims to continue our support and facilitate important conversations like these to further our collaborative effort on climate action. And with that said, I'm excited for the discussions that will sprout from today's agenda and welcome you to this conference on energy efficiency in office and residential buildings. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. That was very interesting and gave a first insight into the Vancouver area, like in terms of energy efficiency. And next I would like to welcome Laura Scharlach to the stage. Laura is the head of division for the German Energy Solutions Initiative at the Renewables Academy AG. She is here on behalf of the German Energy Solutions Initiative of the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much, Nadine. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, welcome everybody. Good afternoon to Canada. Good evening to my fellows in Germany. I'm really happy to be here today. I think it's together with the HK Canada, it's our fifth energy business trip in the last couple of years. Unfortunately, virtually, but hopefully on site the next year. And as I know that we are running out of time, I would like to quickly introduce you to the German Energy Solutions Initiative program. And you can continue with the next slide, please. Again, as Nadine already said, my name is Laura Scharlach. I'm head of the division at the Renewables Academy. We are mainly dealing with international trade promotion, and this German Energy Solutions program is our biggest project in the team. Yes, the initiative facilitates business partnerships in the field of renewable energy, energy efficiency technologies, smart grids, storage, and of course, since 2021, hydrogen, green hydrogen, and all the topics that are build around. The initiative is based on the Parliament decision from 2002 with the aim to, on the one hand, support mostly small and medium-sized German companies. Since this year, we also include companies from other European states, and but still we are focusing on Germany. And we also want to distribute smart and sustainable energy solutions, new energy solutions, and contribute to international climate protection. The whole program is coordinated and financed by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action. And yes, please continue with the next slide. Yeah, thank you. We offer several modules within this initiative. On the one hand, we are providing German companies with information events and an online database. I will write down the link to the online database later on in the chat. And the database is updated just now. It has became pretty new, and it's very convenient, very nice. So it's also for you from Canada, also very interesting to have a look on this website. It's in German and English, and hopefully next year in other languages as well. In this database, you find profiles and contact information of German companies. You can sort regards to technologies or to cities in Germany, or yeah, you can definitely search for any German company that is related to renewable energy and energy efficiency. We also regularly publish the latest information about the Energy Solutions Initiative, also the market analysis from the AHK Canada for this information, or for this energy business trip is also published on that website. And you also get notifications about upcoming events of the initiative within the newsletter. Networking and business opportunities. We organize energy trade missions, which we are here today as well, with the one-day seminars or virtual seminars and individual business meetings. And we are also organizing together with the Ministry foreign trade fairs, for example, the Intersolar in San Francisco in the United States, and one of the biggest, or the Intersolar in Munich. We are here also worldwide with energy trade fairs. Know-how exchange. We organize fact-finding missions to Germany with delegations from abroad, where the delegations receive first-hand information about German energy solutions, new technologies. We also organize on-site visits and networking opportunities, and we also showcase flagship projects around the world. Next one, please. Yeah, here's again the new screenshot of our database. I already mentioned what you can find there. You can, or you should also subscribe for the newsletter, which is coming out monthly with the latest information from very, very interesting technologies worldwide. And yeah, everything that we are doing here today is then also later on published on that database. Next one, please. Yeah. As I said, the energy trade missions, what is also interesting for you is that for the next year, for 2024, we are planning to do more energy trade missions on site. Yeah, we try to skip again from, let's say, pre-corona to post-corona, and everything that we did this year virtually, we definitely will switch to on-site events for the next year. Next one, please. Yeah, the German training weeks, the fact-finding missions to Germany are already mentioned, but the German training weeks, they are organized by the German International Corporation, the GIZ, but this is mainly for developing countries. For now, with a strong focus on Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. I see some of the companies that are here today might know this German training weeks. German companies, in this case, are representatives as trainers, and they do technology-specific trainings or trainings on project on development. Also, you can find the updated list of German training weeks on the website of the initiative. Next one, please. Yeah, that was it from me, like really briefly, really short. I will be here the entire conference. If you want to drop me a mail or want to get in contact with me, feel free. I would be happy to assist you. And yeah, so I will definitely put my contact details in the chat again, and anyhow you receive all the presentations. So Nadine, really quickly, to not lose too much time, and yeah, I give back to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laura. So our next speaker is now Stefan M. Büttner, who's joining us from Germany today. Stefan is director at the Global Strategy and Impact for Global Strategy and Impact at the Institute for Energy Efficiency and Production, and he also chairs the UN ECE Task Force on Industrial Energy Efficiency, as well as the UN ECE Group of Experts on Energy Efficiency. He is working on several multinational committees, such as the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group and the EU Covenant of Companies for Climate and Energy, amongst others. Welcome to our conference, Stefan.
Thank you very much. And just a wee bit of a correction. You may notice it with the slang. I'm actually at the moment near Edinburgh in Scotland. Nevertheless, cordial greetings to all of you. A pity that we cannot meet each other in person, but nevertheless, the content will be hopefully very useful for you. I do take you on a journey in the next 20 minutes across many different aspects of how to increase energy resilience, saving costs, and how you can curb emissions with systemic efficiency approaches. You will get the slides afterwards, so I'm not going to read out everything. So buckle up and let's go. Next slide, please. We have found ourselves in a period of crisis after crisis after crisis, and here's just an example of those aspects that have struck us over the past couple of months in Germany. So curbing the amount of fossil fuels that we receive from our eastern neighboring countries. This is after the start of the war on Ukraine. The side effects on the electricity prices, the considerations whether or not we can maintain supplying all sectors of industry with sufficient amounts of energies, and all the after effects. However, next, there are also, next please. There are also many other crises that we tend to easily forget about in this situation, be it the climate crisis, COVID recovery, recovering from adverse and very harsh weather effects, be it floodings, be it burning forests, be it droughts, and many of those aspects add together and lead to other crises, such as the food crisis. We do have the urge of increasing our security, literally, and energy supply security. Because of those natural incidents, some of the infrastructure that we have may be threatened and come under stress. And part of all that is also that we now suffer and realize that we have interrupted supply chains, be that goods, be that materials, but also we realize that in the desire of becoming more resilient against these crises, many of the known business models have to change. So we have a changing world economy, we have changing markets, we have disruptions in many different sectors, the increasing chances and also threats through digitalization, and many more. However, going and focusing on the building side, let's go to the next slide and click 3 times slowly. So we are already doing a lot, and we could do a lot next. The interest is clear, the solution exists, and also good approaches. However, the implementation still remains slow. And there are next many concrete reasons for that hindrance. We have the issue that we cannot afford doing more because of the high energy costs. The initial costs of taking an intervention may be too high, or we may have issues with the waiting times to get approvals, to get the permit to switch the PV panels on the roof on so that they can actually distribute energy to their house in the grid. We may have waiting times to get the skilled installers, as I'm not the only person that wants something of them, and accelerating costs of the built environment itself due to inflation and over demand. And then we also have a lacking building supply driving costs even further. So there are many hindrance reasons that we need to overcome. However, next, the real potential of systemic efficiency is just waiting for us next. And energy efficiency and systemic efficiency, it's not difficult. It's just a bit or a wee bit complicated, to use slang. Next. Increasing these resiliency approaches with systemic efficiency requires explaining a little bit what systemic efficiency is. Next. In essence, we can optimize individual parts of the system, such as the windows, the walls, the insulation, ventilation system, etc., with the most efficient equipment. However, it may not be effective. The effectiveness, the systemic effectiveness, is combining the overall system. So for instance, I would like a certain brightness level in a particular room, and what forms of energy do I have available to get there? What are the individual steps from, i.e. solar power, wind power, whatever I have within reach, to fulfilling the desire of certain brightness? Same with temperature. So when you see, we have the wiring, we have the lamps, we have the bulbs. There are many little steps. And the overall combination of ingredients, taking into consideration what I have on site and what I want, helps us in gaining systemic efficiency. Next, please. In order to get there, we need some information. What you see here is the equipment of German dwellings with different energy sources. So about half of the households use gas as primary source of heating, and there's about a third each that use electricity and wood pellets, and the other renewable forms of heating are just catching up. What we see on the right-hand side, and that is, I believe, something very important, is that heating makes up 2/3 of the energy consumption in the buildings, in residential buildings. So take note, commercial buildings are slightly different here. The share and proportion of ICT, internet and communication technologies, is increasing, whereas other aspects, because of energy efficiency, for light, might be decreasing. Next slide, please. What we see here is what this translates into. We have heard from Peter about the various different realities that we already face in the building, with the buildings in our economies, both in Canada as well as in Germany. And therefore, you see on the left-hand side the distribution of all the dwellings in Germany per energy efficiency category. So the A category is the best and H is the worst. So we see that a large bulk of buildings is still in the medium to bad category, and there's only a small proportion that is already in the A category. And since the buildings that exist would not unnecessarily be torn down, we need to find ways to improve the existing, perhaps even more than making sure that the newest ones are top-notch. On average, we need to increase the average. There's, however, lots to be done in the D to H categories. We go into that a little bit later, and of course, we should ensure that everything that is put up new needs to be done properly. Next one, please. For a couple of years already, there's the obligation across all the European Union to have energy performance certificates. They look a little bit different country per country, but typically disclose, and that is also a legal requirement whenever one wants to rent out a place or sell a place. This certificate has to be on display. Also on publicly open buildings, this has to be displayed, otherwise there will be fines. However, over the past couple of years, the tendency was to go straight and very deep into the energy performance, and that was the only factor the rating went against. Now, in consideration of climate change and all that, that is now changing. Next, please. For about 2 decades, we have now the emissions trading system in Europe that applies on electricity generated, and we pay that over our electricity bills. However, since 2021 in Germany, we also have a national emissions price, which is levied on other forms of energy apart from electricity. And that is the orange line that we see here. And that is climbing up gradually and increasing the price of emissions associated to notably the heating bill. In 2027, that is going to merge with the emission trading scheme and will then cost up to 85 euros estimated per ton of carbon. To see what that means, you can look at the table on the left, where in 2027, at the price of 85 euros per ton, on average in a not so retrofitted building, that would mean 400 euros additional costs if you have a gas boiler, or even 540 euros extra cost if you have an oil burner. If you have a very well-insulated building or a well-performing building, these costs are much, much lower. So therefore, next slide, please. The European Union, as well as the German government, is driving much more towards the sustainability footprint of materials used, not only in the built environment, but first and foremost, since this is our topic now, in the built environment here. That is associated with the Sustainable Product Initiative. And there's the attempt to build the national funding programs more on the overall environmental footprint, so the emission efficiency rather than just the energy efficiency. And that should lead to a so-called building resource passport. There's a QR code where you can find more of an attempt on how this could look like. This topic is crucially important because of the crisis that we are confronted with. Where do I get materials from, particularly the critical materials that I need? How can I make better use of the materials that are in the system? How can I increase the recyclability? How do I know where the materials are from? That is also very much linked with the supply chain directive, where I need to be able as a manufacturer to disclose that the materials were harvested under acceptable conditions. So there are many things factoring in here, and more products will be confronted with the request to disclose the embedded emissions. Next. In the attempt to support this, there are many activities, and this is one of them globally, to help developing the decarbonization of the built environment in general. So that's the building materials that are to be decarbonized in order to facilitate that. Because if I build a building, I use what's available on the shelves. But how do we make sure that what ends up on the shelves will be better in their lifetime energy performance and emission footprint gradually? So we need to put the impulse to act at the very beginning of the chain, so that we are able or enable the built environment to be able to draw from the best performing products. Next slide, please. So what could those dimensions be? There are three primary dimensions. Two of them are most important in our context today, which is what means are there to reduce the energy demand? Because when I reduce the energy demand, whatever source of fuel I use, I reduce my costs, I reduce the emissions. So being smart about it matters, and therefore we need to be clever also in allocating the mixture of materials and technologies that we use. We can substitute to reduce the footprint, substitute the fuels, which depend largely on what I have around me, but we'll get to that later. And if I am, for example, in the office context and my business wants to promise and pledge for net zero, then we may also need to look into compensation schemes if there are certain things that cannot be completely substituted with, say, renewables. Next one, please. Now let's dive into ingredients on how to make this happen. Next, and next again. And in order to do that, we need to understand we do have very different circumstances. We have different peaking temperatures to the positive and to the negative. And we do have very rural, we have urban and metropolis out setups, and all of which have different environments that we need to account for when it comes to building. Say, access to infrastructure, access to something like heating, district heating and cooling networks, etc., etc. Here, the planability is the largest desire, because in addressing the climate crisis, both the German and the EU legislative bodies have tightened the regime quite a bit, and rightly so. However, that puts large tension on all those that need to act on that basis. And there, how shall I afford that? How shall I lift the multiple tens of thousands of euros investment for that? And there, the communication, clear communication and planability is of the utmost importance, as we have learned the very hard way this summer. So in essence, wherever, and that was the findings, wherever the local authorities plan to implement district heating and cooling, there's going to be not a requirement to put in something like heat pumps. Whereas wherever the local authority doesn't plan to put that in place, district heating cooling, there is going to be an obligation to take heat pump or equivalent action. So, and all local authorities are required to create local heat plans and increasingly also cold plans. That is something that we didn't have on the agenda at all, because it normally doesn't get so hot for so long, and that's changing dramatically. We'll get to that in a moment. If we click next, we see that, and you know that better than I do, the temperature delta is much, much more severe in Canada, and your rural is much more rural than our rural, but the principle applies the same way. Next, please. So in order to get there, we have many different technologies that can help us on this way. Next, and next again. Some of these are creating resilience through self-generation. So what can I do to create my own energy, particularly in the remote areas where I may not have easy access to large-scale renewable generation or clean energy generation? I'm not going to go into detail here. Next, please. What these renewables have in common, however, is that most of them aren't available 24/7 in the same intensity. That has been a cause for an argument in the past. However, there are solutions. Next, please. The solutions against that are called energy demand side flexibility, meaning adjusting my own demand of energy to the available amounts of energy. So either take energy earlier or later than usual, or increase or decrease the energy per time. So for example, putting in the vacuum cleaner, the stove, and the kettle at the same time, or just after another. Another way, next please, is using storage technologies. And whilst we would normally only think of electric batteries as a storage, there are many, many different forms of storage, and all of them have their sweet spot. So there's a document that indicates, and there's the QR code, what storage type is right for which situation. And here you see just some examples. Next, please. What is important to consider, though, is that with storage, particularly the electric generation and battery type storage or electric storage, the way of how the energy is being transmitted is crucial. Because many types or most types of renewable generation that is electric and on-site generates its electricity in direct current, and batteries also store energy in direct current. So ideally, we can use the power line, the generation, and the storage, and directly feed the energy from one to another without, and that way we can save up to 10% of the energy. Now a series of single clicks, please. We can do a lot about building materials. Next. There's lots and lots of technologies in the heating and cooling section. However, There we need to phase out gradually the gas and the old stoves and see how we can make better use of waste heat and other technologies that serve the desire, i.e. getting warm to feel comfy with what's most sensible in that context. It could even be an infrared heating if I have surplus renewable electricity. Next one, please. As said, refrigeration and cooling in the extremely hot summers becomes more and more important. And that's the one form of energy that is gradually increasing in the demand. Next. Particularly in the context of offices and supermarkets, etc., where the cooling requirements are existing, there are so many techniques on how to save on energy consumption, particularly through heat recovery. And there are very nifty ways as an energy or building user to apply those. Next. Innovative building materials is something that we'll hear later out a bit more. So therefore, next again. The challenge or the opportunity we have is to systematically put things together. So avoidance, reduction, implementing renewables, making use of passive ventilation and active heat recovery. Next. Next again, please. Good. Digital means can help us a lot. And on the previous slide, when you get it, you can look at that closer. You find many, many digital solutions on how to help that, and there's also a company to come. However, in order to find a solution, I need to be able to chart my path effectively, and for that, I need to know where I am. Next. The critical aspect here is to trigger, however, the decision, if you're not yourself the decision maker. And for that, next, we need to not only invest into tech, we need to have a range of measures that emphasize each other's impact. Next. And because of that, collectively help to drive energy efficiency. Now, four clicks now. You can look at the examples in your own time. Thank you. And one more. And one more. So finding the ideal mix is actually the real crucial bit. Next. Because it combines not only technologies, next, but the human factor. The human factor means I need the technology, next. I also need the business model, but I particularly need the humans. Tear down the walls of the unknown unknowns. Technology versus taking the decision. The decision is the important thing. Otherwise, technologies don't help me. Getting the buy-in of the stakeholders is so powerful and stronger than just mandate them to do something. Looking for energy waste, like unnecessary consumption. Next. And awareness is much more powerful also as perception, because if I give examples on what could be done, the human brain does something really cool, and that is allowing us to adapt the knowledge from one area to another. And their intrinsic motivation of the stakeholder works much stronger than ordered one. And therefore, it's important to understand where are the pains, what crisis serves most. And removing the barriers that itself, as we know it also from our New Year promises to ourselves, removing the barriers doesn't make us going to the gym more often. We actually have to do it. Yeah, so we need to nudge it. So in conclusion, we need to go beyond removing the barriers. We need to provide the missing knowledge and empower people and stakeholders to solve the issues. We need to remove fears, encourage people to take a decision, and accompany them in the journey ahead. And with that, I thank you very much. You will get the slides and final slide. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stefan. Yeah, that was very interesting to see, how things are going in Germany. And now we would like to have a look at the Canadian side. And yeah, we are glad to have here with us Chris Ballard, CEO of Passive House Canada. Chris has a history of supporting environmental and land causes, and he has been Ontario's Minister of Environment and Climate Change, implementing the government's plan for a clean environment and a sustainable economy. He also served as a Minister of Housing and the Minister responsible for Ontario's poverty reduction strategy. He's also a member of the Treasury Board. So we look forward to your presentation, Chris, and yeah, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to present. I'm hoping that the Nadine, the PDF file I sent through yesterday is one that we can display. There it is. Fantastic. Good news. So what I want to do today, and we've just heard a couple of very good presentations. We've heard about what's happening in Vancouver, and Vancouver, British Columbia is the ancestral home, we'll say, of Passive House Canada. So I don't want to go over the ground that that presenter spoke about, or a lot of the details that Stefan touched on, because a lot of what's happening in Germany is also happening in Canada. My objective really was to give folks a high-level view of the effect of climate change in Canada, government response to reducing GHG emissions, and how climate change is seen as a threat to our health and economy, but also an opportunity to grow our economy through investment and innovation. So again, I don't want to cover any ground that others have gone on before me, but I want to make the case that Canada is a very good place to partner if you're looking for investments going forward. So let's get moving along. Next slide, please. We can go to the next slide. Very simply, who is Passive House Canada? We're a national association of building professionals, trades and contractors. We have about 20,000 supporters now. We do a lot of advocacy work with government, with business. We do a lot of education and professional development, networking, technical services. We're a United Nations Global Center of Excellence for High Performance Buildings. So we work within Canada, and we do a lot of free advisory work with developing nations. Next slide. I won't spend any time talking about the Passive House Standard. I'm going to assume that folks know about Passive House. It's bigger in Europe than it is in North America, although there are some roots going back to the 1970s for Passive House, the Passive House methodology in Canada. Back in the 1970s, we had the oil crisis. The price of oil went exceptionally high, and governments were worried that Canadians would not be able to stay warm in the wintertime when the price of heating oil was rapidly increasing. And so funding from the federal government and the provincial governments looked at a number of ways of addressing this energy crisis. The one they settled on after testing a variety was really good insulation, good components, air tightness. In other words, a lot of the things that have been adopted in the Passive House methodology. Number of other countries were also looking at the same thing. So it's really kind of neat to see this Canadian project reflected in a lot of the standards that is the Passive House standards. So next slide. So you've probably no doubt heard about the wildfire situation in Canada. It's been a complete and utter disaster. We've lost 16.5 million hectares to wildfires this year so far. We still have a couple of more months of wildfire season left. Normally, it's closer to 2.5 million hectares. 16.5 is a lot. More importantly, it accounts for 15.7 thousand premature deaths in Canada per year, primarily due to particulate matter that that comes from wildfires. It also comes from burning diesel fuel and burning coal. So, I mean, we can measure the deaths because of climate change, and it's only getting worse. We've had 2 heat dome events in recent years that resulted directly in 700 deaths, probably double or triple that if we really wanted to peel back the onion. And we know that climate change is a $25 billion annual hit to the Canadian economy by 2025. So all of this is to say that Canadian government and business are motivated to address climate change. Next slide. So what is the response? Well, governments of all levels agree that mitigation and adaptation pays. We know in Canada that for every dollar we invest in adaptation saves us $13 to $15 on direct or indirect economy-wide benefits. We know that limiting further warming gives us even bigger returns. Next slide. A bit of a Canadian legislative response. Canada obviously is a signatory to the Paris Agreement, but within Canada, all of the provinces and territories, together with the federal government, signed an agreement called the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, and that does 3 really key things. It sets emission reduction targets. It looks to grow the economy, and it looks to build resilience to changing the climate. I will say that at the same time, the provincial and federal governments were working on this. We've had 400 plus Canadian municipalities declare a climate emergency within their municipalities, and they are all looking for ways of reducing their carbon footprint within their communities. Namely, primarily because in Canada, a lot of our carbon emissions, GHG emissions, come from buildings. A lot of these municipalities are looking at how they can improve their own building standards to help reduce GHG emissions. Next slide. So we have the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change. Again, 3 things: driving innovation and growth by increasing technology development and adoption, ensuring Canadian businesses are competitive in the global and low carbon economy, and advancing climate change adaptation. The pictures I put in the first few slides were rather dire. They were pictures of wildfires from this year in Canada, but I wanted to look to the future. And this very much seen in this building called Curve, a proposed 60-story passive house tower that will be built in Vancouver and built to the passive house standard, obviously. And I will say that Canadian building scientists, architects, engineers are leading the world in building tall buildings to the passive house standard. So more than multi-unit residential buildings or single-family residences, Passive House Canada and our members are increasingly recognized around the world. If you have to densify or wish to densify your cities, and you at the same time need to reduce GHG emissions and create healthy places for people to live and work and play, the Passive House standard is the way to go. Check out the Curve website, CURB, some stunning pictures. Next slide. So, government's great to set legislation, but we always look to see if they put their money where their mouth is. There's a number of benchmark federal programs that are looking to reduce GHG emissions, to get to net zero buildings, and at the same time foster investment in Canada and innovation in Canada and grow the economy. Key to that is the $15 billion Canadian Canada Growth Fund. I won't get into the details of it, but the focus really is on catalyzing substantial private sector investment and attracting private capital to build our clean economy going forward. Next slide. We have the Housing Accelerator Fund. It's a $4 billion fund with a This is a federal program. Most provinces and territories are putting their own funds in place, their own programs in place that build on top of what the federal government is doing. And we're looking at 100,000 new housing units. It's a drop in the bucket. The Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporations, which is an organization run by the federal government, estimates Canada will require 3.5 million new housing units to fill the supply gap, and all of them will have to be built to net zero going forward. So lots of opportunity is what I'm trying to get at for investment in the Canadian marketplace. Next slide. If we talk about net zero energy ready, and the reason I'm focusing on buildings, obviously that's my background with Passive House Canada is buildings. If we look at major urban settings in Canada, like Toronto, like Vancouver, like Montreal, upwards of 50% plus of GHG emissions come from buildings. So these municipalities are looking to drive down their GHG emissions through building better, building decarbonizing buildings. In Canada, we have a national building code that is then adopted by the provinces. So each province can be slightly different, although we're trying to harmonize the national building code. For the first time ever, the 2030 code will look at climate change and address climate change as a threat to the safety of Canadians. And that's a smart thing. I think it's 10, 15 years late, but better late than never, I suppose. So we're looking at developing the model code for existing buildings as well to improve efficiency during deep energy retrofit. So it's not just new buildings we need to be concerned about, as Stefan was saying, it's also the retrofit of existing buildings. Personally, I think that the deep energy retrofit of residential towers across Canada will be where we get our biggest GHG emission reduction. So again, if you have technology, if you have ideas, there is a growing marketplace in Canada. On top of the other funds, there's a $2 billion low carbon economy fund to help provinces and territories improve building energy performance. There's all sorts of other money that the federal, provincial, even municipal governments are putting in place. But these were just some of the top line items. Next slide. So we talk about the federal government and its work with provincial governments. We heard earlier about BC. I've said British Columbia is sort of the ancestral home of Passive House Canada. It's where our head office is in Victoria, BC. But BC really has led the way across Canada in adopting an energy step code for buildings. I'm happy to say that there are 5 steps in the code, and step 4 and 5 are really Passive House or Passive House adjacent. So BC recognizes the importance of the Passive House metrics. BC is also working very hard to decarbonize transportation through public transit and really deep rebates for electric vehicles. But when it comes to buildings, that step 4, step 5 are driving innovation all across the province. Next slide. Another driving a deeper dive. And again, I didn't realize we'd have Vancouver here today. I will back what they're saying. The Vancouver Green Building Standard is one of the best in Canada, and it has driven other cities to improve. Other cities like Toronto, very slow to get on is Montreal, but they're looking to Vancouver and to learn from Vancouver. Passive House is a pathway to new building compliance. The treated floor area, there's increased treated floor area allowed as bonusing if you're building to the Passive House standard. So it's a carrot and stick. The stick is increased regulation that drives down carbon emissions, GHG emissions. The carrot is if you do it, there can be some nice things for you, such as a increase in treated floor area. I mentioned about transit. And I mentioned one of the other big areas in BC is incentivizing the move from fossil fuel for heating and cooking. So a move away from the use of methane gas for cooking to electric, and specifically electric induction, and the move from using fossil fuels for heating to electrified air source heat pumps, geothermal, that sort of thing to make your buildings work. I will say that speaking of Passive House, there is a real exciting project beside the curve. The University of Victoria has built a very large student residence that is 100% carbon fuel free. So they're providing really nice accommodation for hundreds of students, including their cafeteria, their restaurant, which is all electric. And it presented some real challenges, but we proved that it could be done. Next slide. So in Toronto, we have the Toronto Green Standard, and kudos to the City of Toronto for accelerating the step code approach of the tiers. They're moving faster on it than initially planned. The top tier of their code, of the City of Toronto's code, is Passive House, and they're as well working to decarbonize and expand transit. They've recognized Passive House as a pathway to net zero, and they're offering all sorts of incentives for homeowners and builders, building owners, to improve their homes' energy efficiency. So next slide. I should make a comment too. You know, one of the key differences between Europe and Canada, quite frankly, and why I think Europe or North America has been slow to adopt high efficiency, low energy buildings, is frankly the price of energy in. And I'll speak for Canada. The price of energy in Canada is ridiculously low. The federal government has implemented a price on carbon so that people who pollute or businesses who pollute pay more. That carbon pricing revenue goes to fund a lot of these programs I was talking about, but it also goes back to lower income Canadians to offset their costs of paying a little bit more for energy. But you know, today in my town in Ontario, gasoline was $1.73 for a liter. Probably 50% of that is tax. So while people grumble about the price of energy here, the price of filling up their car, it's nowhere near what those of you who live in Europe face. Same with natural gas, and even to some point heating oils, all much lower than Europe. And it's been a huge challenge because you can't use just the price of energy to move people to change. So there we are. Next slide, please. So I mentioned social housing. Sorry, I've skipped one. One of the biggest adopters of Passive House or high performance net zero building standards is social housing across Canada, for a number of reasons. When you build high performance, you get obviously energy savings, which can be substantial if you're running a 10 or 12 story or higher sized apartment building. If you don't have a monthly natural gas bill, that can be thousands and thousands of dollars. But as well, when we build high performance, we also build far more durable systems. We build systems that are less complex and easier to maintain.
Sorry, just to say you have 5 more minutes.
Perfect. I'm running it down here, so that's good. I just wanted to touch on opportunities. The Toronto Community Housing, second largest in North America, largest in Canada, 2,100 buildings, 6,000 rental housing units. Next slide. They've adopted the Passive House retrofit standard. And bullet number 3 says an awful lot about where we're going in Canada. In the next 3 to 5 years, that entity alone will need 200,000 Passive House quality windows for their buildings. And this is just phase 1 of their redevelopment. By the time we add our schools and hospitals and all other government buildings alone, we'll be into the millions. The question that we ask at Passive House Canada is, where are those windows going to be made? Where are they coming from? Same with HRVs and all of the other things that are required to build to this high standard of building that governments in Canada are demanding. So if you provide these, then that's well worth looking at how you might be able to position yourself in Canadian markets. Next slide. Canada is very much heading down that road to electrifying everything, whether it be buildings or transportation. And that's critically important to get us off our addiction to fossil fuels. Next slide. Offsite construction, and I know that Europe is really the leader in this, and we have sent our staff to tour a number of facilities in Europe, and this has growing interest in Canada, and we have a number of offsite construction companies that are looking and talking about locating in Canada. They're trying to get a better understanding of what the marketplace offers. But if you remember back to that statistic, $3.5 million housing units required, my estimation, this is how it's going to be done. Next slide. I won't spend any time on the Passive House standard. You can have access to the deck and check it out yourself later on. Next. Very quickly, in conclusion, I would say that Canada is an extremely desirable company to invest in. A lot of European companies find us a good stepping stone to the American market. There is a massive uptake in high performance buildings coming, like Passive House or Passive House adjacent. Governments have set very strict legislative targets. They're providing billions to encourage innovation and investment. And decarbonizing of buildings requires components to be made as close as possible to use. So that means where we've imported all sorts of components from Asia, from Europe, we'll be doing less and less of that as we start looking at embodied carbon. And transportation plays a big role in that. And there's a shortage of well-priced components built in Canada for the building market. So next slide, I think, is our thank you. I will leave it there and turn the floor back to Nadine. And I really thank you for the opportunity to present today. If anyone has follow-up questions, I'm here. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. That was very, very interesting. And, there were so many more facts that we could, learn about. So yeah, unfortunately, we cannot cover it during this short conference. But if you want to reach out to Chris, just, give him or send a message in the chat. And yeah, our next speaker is a representative of a German company. It's Mr. Robin Herter. He's a business development manager at GetAir GmbH. And he has been working for ventilation and air filter companies for nearly 10 years. So since mid-2022, he has been overseeing the expansion into new markets outside of Europe. So welcome, Robin.
Thank you. Thank you for your invitation. And yeah, thanks all for joining my presentation. My presentation is about, because GetAir, where I'm working for as a company, as a manufacturer, German manufacturer, of residential ventilation systems with heat recovery. So what I speak about is the impact of ventilation with heat recovery on residential buildings, and especially on a very interesting study that is currently released in Germany. And yeah, so that I will focus on. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. The Canadian government is facing an urgent need to address climate change, and one of the key objectives is to become carbon neutral by 2050 as EU. So the ambition target requires significant efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across all sectors. Next, please. And one of the important sector is the building sector. Today, residential, commercial, institutional buildings contribute 70% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. Considering building materials and constructions bring that number is closer to 30%, making the building sector Canada's third highest carbon emitter. So what that means and what you can see, what you can see for BC example is they can see that is a big topic, and so the plan is zero emission buildings and all new construction by 2030. And so for this, we need to look at the energy efficient houses, so how they can get more efficient. And yeah, please to the next slide and see that. So what we can see with energy efficient houses, we saw Chris was talking about by the Canadian Passive House. You can see we need to optimize the building's envelope. So what we need to do is the super insulation, air tightness. But what brings the tightness and super insulation on the houses, it keeps the warmth inside and the cold outside. But the problem is it keeps the mold inside as well. There's no air circulation. So this is crucial that we have efficient heat recovery ventilation system for these houses that are coming. So, and what is the biggest topic on this is that we need to reduce voidable ventilation heat losses. That's absolutely crucial. So, yeah. Please come to this is not the next slide. Okay, I would skip here. I would go to make a little journey to Europe right now, because right now I spoke about the energy efficiency ventilation system. But the big topic right now in Germany is we have there the energy performance of building directive right now. That means what says that by the year 2045, all fossil fuel-based heating system must be replaced with sustainable alternatives. So what this means? So this means that right now, all focus in Europe is on, especially in Germany, is on heat pumps. So please come to the next slide, please. But the biggest problem here with heat pumps is they're quite energy efficient, but the problem is if the temperature decreases, they get less and less energy efficient. So, but the residential ventilation system, for this you can see on this slide, is when it's getting colder and colder, the energy efficient rising up. So this is a perfect complementary system to the heat pumps. Not only complementary, it's a perfect energy efficient system for themselves. So please go to the next slide to see what the study says on the next slide. So what these COP values that we use here for is to compare heat pumps with a residential ventilation system. So what we can see, the best residential ventilation systems with high heat recovery can reach COP values up to 70. This means that for every unit of electricity consumed, they provide 70 units for heating or cooling output. So significantly reducing energy consumption and cost. This is really, this is absolutely crucial, especially for Canada. For the cold seasons, you need to have an energy efficient system that is energy efficient when it's getting colder. And there are the problems with other systems like I spoke about, like heat pumps. So that is why I focus here right now on the residential ventilation system. So what you can see here, what I found in the internet here is the ENA guide. So there you can see which part is what is important here, and this is the space heat. So we really need to focus on the space heat. We need to reduce the heat loss in every house. So please. To the next slide. So yeah, this is for the study as well. That the picture that's shown here is about when we use these both systems, like residential ventilation and heat pump together. Yeah, we need renewable energy, absolutely, but we can reduce the demand of renewable energy. So if you use very energy efficient system like heat pumps and residential ventilation system with heat recovery, we can reduce that demand. So please to the next slide. So, and what this study show as well is for comparison, when you have like an energy efficient house with a super insulating of wall, of windows, and you have no energy efficient ventilation system inside. You can see with energy efficient ventilation system with heat recovery above 85% can save up to 69% of energy consumption and GHG emissions. So that means not we need to close the windows or we don't need windows anymore, but it means if you close the windows in the winter time, you can save a lot of energy consumption here, and this is up to 69%. That is a lot. So please to the next slide. So, but for residential ventilation system, this not only important the energy consumption is as well, they have additional benefits. And the additional benefits is one is a health benefit. Proper ventilation ensures fresh air circulation, reducing the risk of indoor pollutants, and as well building preservation. Energy efficient system help maintain stable temperature and humidity levels, preventing moisture related issues that can damage building structures over time. And I think this is it right now for the building, for the installation part, for the cost of these systems is these systems, these compact residential ventilation systems with heat recovery, they're really easy to install. Please to the next slide.
Herr Herter, Sie haben noch 2 Minuten.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I'm finished on the next 2 slides. So this is the system. So the system is, we can see all the components. We have indoor, you can see there the cover indoor where the air goes inside. There's by the ventilators, like by the fan, it sucks outside, goes through the ceramic heat exchanger so that heat up saves the energy, the warmth inside by up to 90%. So that means when like by 0 degree, the air come after the fan switch back in the room, that is heat up by 90%. So that means it's 21 degrees goes outside, 90 goes inside. So you have you only need to heat up just 3 degrees. So you do not need a lot of energy. So this is one big topic here. So yeah, please to the next slide. Yeah, and this is like a project that we have right now in Bavaria. This is like a timber wood framed energy house here. You can see how it installed. It's super easy. You have there like a mountain block that you put inside in the frame, and yeah, just put the tube inside. Just put the components of these ventilation system inside. There's a ceramic heat exchanger. We have the fan, and yeah, that's all. And then you need a cable to that, and yeah, that's all. So it's really easy, it's really compact, and the installation is not that expensive. So yeah, it's a good system to save a lot of energy. So to the last slide, and then I'm finished. So what is the conclusion of all is comprehensive energy efficient approach for climate goals necessary. Super insulation, energy efficient heating and ventilation are crucial. Heat pumps and ventilation systems complement each other perfectly. Benefits include energy savings, health, and building preservation. And the most important point here is the highest energy savings from residential ventilation with heat recovery at cold temperatures. Yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, thanks for your attention. For every questions you have, just ask me.
Yeah, thank you much, Robin. If you have any questions, please contact him in the chat. And now we would like to come to our next speaker, who is Martin Gruber from the Canadian company Brainbox AI. Martin is the European director for the company, and he is a passionate advocate for technology that is transforming energy markets and reducing emissions of commercial buildings. Over his career, Martin has established himself as an innovation leader at organizations including Crayon, Netconomy, Ethos, and Accenture. His work has focused on enabling and transforming large global brands from initial contact to delivery in markets that include e-commerce, sales, service, digital retail, IoT, and AI. Martin is based in Vienna in Austria. Welcome, Martin. And Martin, just to let you know, we can hear a lot of background noise.
Is it?
Yes, unfortunately.
Okay, strange, because I'm in a very silent area.
It's okay, yeah, but just to let you know, yeah.
Is it okay, or need to change something?
No, well, now it's not that much anymore. There was before there was some announcement or yeah.
Yeah, sorry for that. Nadine, thank you so much for the intro and welcome everybody. So as Nadine said, I'm representing Brainbox, and we way around than before. So we went from Canada, US to the European theater, and with the mission to autonomously decarbonize the real estate industry. So next slide, please. So I think basically these are not new numbers, and thanks Stefan for highlighting a lot of things which are highlighting why we are on the market. But in the end, to quickly summarize, is what is that a lot of energy consumption is produced by buildings, and if you look into buildings, around 50% of the energy consumption is due to heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, whereas 30% of the energy consumption is wasted because of inefficiencies. So taking that into account and taking into account all the ESG regulations we have in place, this is why Brainbox was originally founded. Next slide, please. So I think the overall objective is that commercial buildings around the world are waiting to be revolutionized, and we need to break the negative energy consumption patterns that exist today. So what does that perfectly say is the type of buildings we are focusing on. So that means we clearly focus on commercial buildings, whereas shopping center, multi-site retail, office towers, but as well as schools and universities are the key target for our technology, where we want to have an impact on. Next slide, please. So the question is now, we understood everything, what you heard before, there's a huge challenge there, but the question is how Brainbox AI can help. Next slide, please. And that's basically that we build up a technology which is a pure software as a service model that's gonna do a 3-step autonomous decarbonization journey with you. So what I mean by that is that we are coming from the central part, which we call here the reduce. So we are here to reduce the energy consumption and emission by our AI-powered HVAC technology. How that works, I'm gonna get there in a second. On top, what we do is based on the energy, on the data of the building,